Hello everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'll be talking about some news that came out of the DNC yesterday. That new DNC Vice Chair, David Hogg, is planning on primarying incumbent Democratic members of Congress as soon as 2026. Now, this is pretty significant news. I know it isn't necessarily like the most direct thing happening in politics right now, but I really wanted to talk about it because this shows a monumental shift within the Democratic Party, and one that I'm going to argue today isn't good for the party. Now, let me preface this by saying that I'm not expressing a view on whether or not I support the feelings behind these efforts, whether I oppose them. I'm talking solely from an electoral perspective, why I think it is bad for the Democratic Party. So let me begin by saying that David Hogg, I don't think, is a particularly good pick to be the DNC's vice chair. Now, this position is not incredibly powerful. It's not anywhere near as powerful as the DNC chair position, which is held by Ken Martin, who is the former chair of the Minnesota Democratic Party. But this is obviously a position that does hold a good deal of power. And as we can see here, David Hogg is going to spend money to take down Democratic incumbents. Now, why is this happening? It's pretty simple. It's happening because Democrats, especially the base and likely David Hogg, feel that the members of Congress who are Democrats are not fighting hard enough by and large. They're not fighting Trump hard enough. They're not bringing the energy hard enough, and they're not messaging the right way. And I think this has been a problem with the Democratic Party that is legitimate for years. I think a lot of their leaders, especially, and I'm not saying this in a political way. I'm saying this in a objective electoral way, such as Chuck Schumer. Right, their leaders are perceived as being out of touch, and a lot of Democrats, ever since the spending bill showdown, have been really, really upset at Chuck Schumer. And so David Hogg, in a move that I think is actually going to mirror a lot of what the base wants, is going to kind of do some friendly fire. He's going to take a lot of that anger out before Democrats can beat Republicans in the general election on Democrats themselves. So I think Democrats who have been in Congress for a while or who have been quieter, who have kind of just been backbenchers but serving for many terms, they're in deep trouble right now. Because not only is the Democratic base angry with their politicians because they feel they're not doing enough to fight Trump, but now you have a figure within the party saying, not only do we support ousting you, we're going to actually try to oust you. We're going to do something about it. And I think that the appeal for this is pretty simple. Democrats are not popular right now. The party's brand is tarnished nationally. I think you can blame some of that on Joe Biden. I think you can blame some of that on messaging. I think you can blame some of that on just the social state of America right now. But certainly, there would be some benefits that would come to the party if the older politicians and the politicians who've been, at the top of the party for decades, lost power. I think Chuck Schumer not being Senate Majority Leader electorally would be beneficial for Democrats. I think they would benefit from having kind of a new face on the national stage. And so, for that reason, what I think is so interesting is that, while the Democratic base is certainly legitimate or is certainly expressing valid concerns about getting rid of these longtime politicians, of primarying out these incumbents, it is not the first time we've seen something like this before. Go back to 2010 when Republicans 2 years prior had lost in a landslide to Barack Obama after a woefully unpopular George W. Bush left office. Republicans were upset with their politicians, and they were unhappy with how Republicans are dealing with the first half of Obama's first term. So what did we have? We had the Tea Party movement where Republican voters primaried out tons of incumbents. They said, hey, we want fires, we want younger blood. They got it, and then the 2010 midterms, Republicans saw a lot of success. A lot of that success came from those candidates too. So Democrats might find themselves in a similar position to the Republicans after 2008 where they're angry. They feel like their politicians are not representing them and they're not fighting for them in Washington. And that anger might very well be expressed in primaries. And people have been saying this since January that it, there are going to be some surprise results. There are going to be some Democratic incumbents who are going to lose their primaries because people are angry or because Democrats are angry. Now, that I think can make sense. It can be good for the party in terms of cleaning house, and it can be good electorally because getting new leaders and fresh blood within a party that is right now not popular is one way to go about fixing things. We're slowly starting to, kind of you know, I don't want to say rebuild because Democrats thought they were in a good position 2 years ago. Now they're definitely not. But I think maybe clean house and retool is a better way to put it. So those are my acknowledgments. That is 100% true. And I think a lot of Democratic voters could rationally justify voting out these incumbents. At the same time, I think this is a wildly irresponsible move from David Hogg. And I also think that it does not say good things at all about the state of the Democratic Party right now. On this channel, I've talked a lot about party competence. And I'd say since 2021, I have made the argument that the Democratic Party has been more competent than Republicans. In both 2020, in 2022 especially, but also to an extent in 2024, Republicans lost a lot of winnable races because they ran bad candidates. In 2022, in that Senate map, Republicans, I think, had a nightmare slate. And I don't mean that to say, again, I'm not articulating an opinion on whether or not I would have voted for these candidates. I am saying in terms of pure electability, Herschel Walker in Georgia, Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania, and Blake Masters in Arizona were very bad candidates. And I think Republicans could have won any of those three races, if not all three of them, had they picked better nominees. And so we saw a similar thing in the governor's races. Like, look at Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania. He lost by 15 points. Kari Lake in Arizona totally should have won that race, and she ended up losing by a couple, I think 20,000 votes. And so Republicans shot themselves in the foot in 2022, and in 2024, they could have won those Senate races if they'd fielded better candidates. They could have won a few more House races too. And Democrats, on the other hand, they were by no means having a blue wave in 2022, and even in the down ballot race, 2024 was still not a great year for Democrats. Like, they lost both houses of Congress. But I felt were more unified, more organized, even though that can only get you so far in politics. And now you have David Hogg coming out and saying, I'm going to spend money to get these incumbents out of here. And that's very different from the voters saying that. The voters saying that is actually a normal kind of pendulum swing. It happened to the Republicans in 2010. It's likely to happen. It was likely, whether or not David Hogg came out and said something like this, right? I think Democratic incumbents were always going to lose some primaries come next spring. But I think Hogg doing this, not only is it a clear signal of divisiveness, or of division, really, and of incompetence within the party, it's also a waste of money. If we are to believe Hogg that he is going to be spending money to take out these, say a list of 20 Democrats who have been serving for, at least 10 terms in the House and who, haven't been loud enough to fight Trump, right? That's money that could be spent winning re-election for Jon Ossoff in Georgia. It could be spent holding the governor's mansion in Arizona. It could be spent trying to flip a Senate seat in North Carolina. And so, pretty clearly, even if Democrats are unhappy with the way their incumbents in Congress are behaving, it is to their benefit that they leave that to the voters. And the money should go not for races that are Democrat versus Democrat, but for races that are competitive Democrat versus Republican. And this is basic, it's logical, it's what parties should do. And Republicans, for all the issues they had in 2022 and 2024, rarely were they trying to primary out their incumbents. There were a few cases, like in 2022, Republicans tried to save some of their incumbents from losing their primaries, like Peter Meyer in Michigan. But at the same time, what we saw was that for all their shortcomings, they were not saying, I'm going to spend money to oust an incumbent. The closest thing we had to that was Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump, this is obviously a very interesting example because Donald Trump did endorse primary challengers to some incumbents in 2022, especially those who voted against him, right? Especially those who voted to impeach him in 2021, right? But the party itself did not come out and do fundraising against, Tom Rice in South Carolina, or Jamie Herr Butler in Washington. And so at the end of the day, this is the Democrats, I think, overreacting. I think this is their party going too far, and in a way that only hurts them. So this is a bad sign for them. I think that there are a lot of reasons to think they're going to have a good 2026. Trump is getting more unpopular by the day. The economy, there aren't really great indicators there right now. And Democrats have done well in recent special elections. So the signs for, the early signs could be there. There's reason to be optimistic if you're a Democrat about 2026. But pretty clearly, this is not a good sign for them. And I think this comes as a result of electing someone like David Hogg, who I do not think was a good candidate to be the vice chair of the party. So again, let me know what you all think, and I will see you all in the next video.